Welcome back to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor. I'm joined today by a peer, somebody who loved sales and sales leaders just as much as I do, I think. His name is Darren Mitchell, and let me tell you a little bit about Darren. Darren Mitchell is one of Australia's most respected voices in sales leadership, ranked among the top 20 sales influencers in Australia in 2025. Now, his own podcast, he's been doing this for over 5 years. His podcast is called The Exceptional Sales Leader, and I really recommend everyone check that out. And can you imagine, he's already done 788 episodes, which is phenomenal. With over 2 decades of success across corporate sales, sales management and leadership coaching, Darren empowers sales leaders and teams to achieve exceptional results through a blend of strategic acumen, emotional intelligence and practical leadership frameworks. Known for his authenticity, which you'll get a sense of today, practical wisdom and ability to unlock untapped potential, Darren designs and facilitates high-impact programs, and his client list spans respected names like Qantas, KPMG, Australia Post, Hyundai, World Vision, Now Finance and Wesfarmers. Whether on stage or in the boardroom or one-on-one, Darren is committed to elevating the performance, mindset and influence of today and tomorrow's sales leaders. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Ingrid. Hey, what a great introduction. As you're reading that, I'm thinking, gee, this person sounds pretty
He
cool.
sounds all right.
Maybe I might go and see if I can meet this person.
Yeah, he might be worth listening to.
Yeah, well, he might be, but that'll be for others to judge.
That's right. That's what they say.
They do.
I have no doubt about that it's going to be a great conversation. I mean, we're going to start, Darren, with your journey, because I'm just a big sticky nose and I'm always interested in the journeys of my guests, where they started and the pillars along the way. So I want to hear from you about that. So let's talk about your start and what some of those signposts were along the way that led you to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. Great question, Ingrid. And it goes back, well, over 30 years. So I often say to people that my wife and I, we met at university and we were both studying building engineering. So, and it's interesting when I speak to my guests and I ask the very similar question, it's very rare that somebody says to me, hey, I woke up one day and I thought, yeah, sales will be the career choice for me. I'll go to sales university and I'll be a professional salesperson for the rest of my life. I actually had no inclination, no intention to move into sales whatsoever, because my whole intention was to become a very high-powered multi-story building project manager, having done an engineering degree. So back in the day, Paul Keating was the Prime Minister back in late 80s, early 90s, and we had the recession that we had to have. The construction companies that I was working with went broke. They tried to start again, went broke, started again, went broke. Long story short, I jumped out of the industry of construction thinking there's no future here. And I got into a company called Optus, which was just becoming the second carrier in Australia. So they got the second carrier license. And I spent some time in telemarketing, talking to small business customers, talking to residential customers. And I've always loved the relationship building side of stuff. But long story short, I started working with the corporate sales team, or the Optus business sales team as they were then known, and started to work with some of the account managers. And this was probably 2 years after I'd started in the business. And I thought, God, these guys actually dress quite well. They drive nice cars. They spend a lot of time out of the office. They also spend a bit of time on the golf course. And there's some long lunches. Now, this is back before fringe benefit tax really took a hold, so no longer can you have the really long lunches. So I thought, I think I might get a piece of that. So I started working with a friend of mine who was a really well-received and a good reputation around corporate selling. And I just followed him. And one thing led to another, and I got an opportunity to do a couple of secondments. And I thought, I think I'd like to do this, because at the time my perception of selling was dodgy used car, knock on the door and sell you a vacuum cleaner even though you don't want one and close at all costs. But what I was seeing was a completely different approach. These guys were building good relationships. They were actually walking into buildings and into businesses where they were respected by the customers who were there to see them. So I thought this sales thing that I thought was dodgy has good reputation about it. And I saw people operating with good ethics. And I thought, yeah, this is a career. So I managed to get into that, and I was lucky to work with a gentleman who at the time was running a company, an account called Pacific Dunlop. And Pacific Dunlop, for those who can remember back in the day, they had Bonds Underwear, South Pacific Tires. They were a conglomerate of multiple different brands, and they were very big in the late 80s into the mid 90s up to the year 2000. And I got the opportunity, to work on that account for a couple of years, and that was the catalyst for me to really get deep into this corporate selling and what I call strategic sales. And I managed to work in that business and go from a junior account manager to a strategic account manager within 5 years, which had never been done before. And I was working on the account Main Nicholas or Main that was then. I did that for a couple of years, and then I felt that there was just something missing. And whilst I loved the sales game, I loved the relationships, I loved all the stuff around selling, I just felt that I could add more value if I was developing people, because as I was going through, I was mentoring some of the junior account managers coming through as well. And I wanted to try apply my trade to say, what if I could mentor, and what if I could coach, what if I could manage a team? So I got that opportunity, and about, when was it? Early 2004, which is probably about, I think about 5 or 6 years after I started in the sales role, got the opportunity to run a sales team, and really never looked back from that day. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of challenges. One of the biggest challenges, and I often talk to sales leaders about this today, is that I went one day from being a peer within the sales team to the next day being the leader of that team. Yeah. So I also had a person in that team who was my very first sales mentor, who pretty much helped me fast track my development. And he had 20 more years experience than I did. And it's just a really powerful lesson in your ability to build authentic relationships, to the point where he supported me in that transition and did not see it as this young upstart now cutting his lunch. So it was a really good transition into that particular role, but it wasn't easy. So the first 90 days was extremely painful, and it nearly broke me.
Why?
Well, because I thought that the best way to build trust with my team was to create an environment where the open door policy, as we always hear about, come and talk to me about all your challenges, all your problems. I'm here to help you, because my whole remit was I've got to build trust with this team, because I've gone from peer to now being a leader. Yeah. And the way I thought to build that trust and build that bridge was to solve the problems for them. So within 90 days, I had created a heavy codependent relationship where the team were relying on me to solve the problems for them, and I was relying on them to come to me with problems so I could solve them. So guess what? That's exactly what they did, and I kept solving them. It wasn't until I found a mentor about 90 days into my sales leadership journey that I realised what I was doing. And he said, you've got to change something, because if not, you're going to burn out. You need to create this independence of thought. And so we started to put some strategies in place to try and teach people that it's okay to come to me with problems, but how about you think about some possible solutions first before we sit down and have a conversation. So one of the key lessons that I learned through that phase, and it's something I use a lot today, is my whole purpose should have been to teach my team resourcefulness, not to give my team the resources. So there's a big difference.
There's a huge difference, and I'm going to come back and double down on that, because that's just something that I have no doubt that sales leaders who are listening to this are really, really relating to everything that you're saying. Okay, so it was unheard of at that stage to have reached a strategic account manager level within 5 years. How did you get from there, though, to where you are now?
As in terms of what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Well, we all go through stages. So
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be a sales leader, and so I spent 2 years before I was given the opportunity. I spent 2 years getting prepared for the opportunity. That when it hit, I was the one that was the most prepared out of anybody. And I remember going through the interview process, and I was up against probably about 4 or 5 other highly credentialed, great people who could have done the role, I think, as equally well as I did. Right? But the difference was they had more experience. Some of them had MBAs or in the process of doing MBAs, and I had none of that. Right?
Yeah.
But what they didn't have is they didn't have the preparation. They hadn't done what I call the apprenticeship, because I'd spent 2 years up until that point literally getting ready for this opportunity if and when it would present itself by thinking about every conversation I had, every email I wrote, every meeting I ran, every proposal I developed was always through the lens of what would the sales leader of this team do? How would the sales leader act? What would the sales leader think in terms of this situation? And I had role models within the business, some good, some not so good, that I could learn from that helped me get prepared for the role. And I say to people all the time, if you want to get promoted, you've got to not wait for the opportunity. You've got to start thinking about what does the role entail and how am I going to think differently than my competitors to differentiate myself when the opportunity arises. So I got the role, and the feedback I got at the time was you're the only obvious candidate because of all the preparation you've done. But nobody knew I'd done that preparation. It was just me doing my thing.
Yeah.
So I spent a number of years there. Then I got headhunted to go to Telstra.
Okay. The opposition.
Yeah.
But the market leader.
Well, the market leader, and look, at Optus and Telstra at the time, it would open doors with most large organisations. So they had the brand recognition, and with that had a level of credibility. So I got headhunted across, and I started to come across, and I was headhunted by a national director. And my very first day, he said, "Welcome to the team." I was thinking, what a great opportunity to work at a bigger company, new set of accounts, new sales team, awesome. My very first day there, it was January the 9th, 2009. And I remember the day like yesterday. I sat down and John gave me the list of accounts, but also the team that I was managing. And I had a bit of a sense of the team individuals. And I was looking through the list of the accounts that were under my team's management, and about 95% of those accounts were identical to the accounts I'd been managing for the previous 3 or 4 years at Optus.
Oh.
And I said, John, here I was thinking of have a new portfolio, a new set of accounts to work on and to manage and apply the trade. And he said, well, why do you think we brought you across?
Right.
So the other lesson it taught me was, as a sales leader, but also as a sales professional, your reputation is everything. So 6 weeks before, I was having meetings with Orica. I was having meetings with KPMG. I was having meetings with the heads of Visi. And I'm now going into those same organisations, seeing the same people, but now wearing a completely different hat. And as I look back on that, there was only one person within the entire portfolio that I had who had a problem with me now working for the biggest competitor of Optus, and that was the person at Visi. But most other people were very receptive and knew that, hey, it's the reputation that I had built, not so much. And I'd never bagged the competition. It was a big test in terms of your own personal brand and what you stand for when you're in front of customers. Yeah. But I did that for a few years, and it just got, to be brutally honest and authentic here, Ingrid, I got just tired and fatigued with all of the administration expectations that were thrown upon the sales leaders. It became less and less about enabling the team, teaching and coaching the team and developing the team, and more about what's the administration, what's the CRM application, what's the CRM compliance numbers. Sitting down, and today as we're sitting down, it's the end of the financial year for most organisations, and I guarantee if I was still in one of these organisations, I'd be sitting in front of my sales directors right now doing cadence reports on what we're going to close before the end of close of business today. And I just got sick of it. I said, this is not what I sign out for. I understand there's an administration component to being a sales leader, but not to be to the point where it's now becoming a burden. because it meant
Yes.
that I couldn't spend time with the team. I couldn't spend time out with customers because the expectation was I had to do these reports, I had to do the forecasting, it was all the managing up stuff that I
Yeah.
had to be across. I just got bored. I got bored, and it wasn't what I signed up for. So, the catalyst for the real catalyst for what I do today is I was working with a company called Rogen SI back in the day, and one of their
Yeah.
directors. We'd engage them to come into Telstra and help the sales leaders develop a sales coaching and a teaching and methodology around mentoring. And I got involved in that from the Telstra side and worked really closely with the director out of Melbourne to put this program together. And we had the year of the coach that was, back in probably 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. But I got a phone call from him one day and he said to me, "Hey, Darren, have you ever thought about maybe doing some facilitation and some coaching for us as an associate?" And I said, his name's James. And I said, "James, what's an associate?" what's that? And he said, "Oh, you just explain it and you run programs, whether it be a sales program or a presentation skills or negotiation, influence skills, and, we pay you to do that." I said, "Okay, sounds pretty cool." So I went through what they call an interview process, which was really just an interrogation process. And he said, "Right, what you need to do is you're going to have 15 minutes. You're going to come into the Rogen SI offices and you're going to present for 15 minutes on a topic of your choice.
Okay.
And we're going to have all the directors, all the account managers, all the people that place our associates into clients to see whether we think you're a good fit for our client base." So I thought, because at the time I was thinking, because I was doing a lot of internal facilitation within Telstra, helping different teams, but also my own team. So I thought, I'll just go and talk about some leadership stuff. So I spent 15 minutes on a flip chart doing some things, and the feedback was it normally takes about 2 weeks to get some feedback from those initiation interviews. He called me that afternoon. He said, "You're in." I said, "Oh,
Right.
okay. That's great. I'm working full-time here. Now you want me to be an associate." And this is back in early 2015.
Yes.
So we worked on a few things. I had some leave up my sleeve. So I did a couple of, test cases in terms of test days when I had some leave, just to dip the toe in the water. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
So I managed to agree with Telstra to take a leave of absence, if you like, a permanent leave of absence at the end of the middle of June
Yes.
2015, and from that date, that was the start of the journey that I'm now on, and certainly nowhere near the end of. So since then, I've been working with lots of different organisations and had the privilege of working with lots of different sales teams and lots of different leaders in lots of different industries, which I would never have had the opportunity for if it hadn't have been for, the involvement that I had with Rogen back at that time, and certainly individuals within that business. So, very, very grateful.
Oh my goodness, Rogen SI. That's a name I haven't heard for a really long time. I used to come up against that. I can't remember whether they were an actual client or whether we were just contacting them when I had my previous business Harvest. But anyway, one of the things that really jumped out at me was, there were a few things that I wrote down here, and that was, in that first 90 days.
Yeah.
You really wrestled with, making that transition from mate to manager. And I think that that's something that a lot of leaders can really recognise themselves within. But also that you love mentoring, coaching and managing people. That was your real first love.
Yeah.
But when it came to everything, and this is one of the things that I think will emerge as a bit of a theme as we continue to speak today, is preparation meeting opportunity. You were saying that, all of the other candidates for certain roles, had certain qualifications. But what you did was you made sure that everything that you did was almost like you were always thinking 2 years ahead of the role that you would eventually go for. And so you were building evidence as you went with that mind of the role that you were going towards. And the reason that I pulled that out is because that I think that a lot of emerging sales leaders can really take that on board as a very practical practice for themselves to be thinking about roles in the future. And then you talked about something that I know you called it out, but I'm also calling it out, underlining it here, that Rogan SI had Year of the Coach, and that was 14 years ago. And even today, I would say that most leaders, let alone sales leaders, they think that they're good coaches, but their understanding of good coaching is very different. Before we talk about the mission that you're on, I want to get from you some distinctions here between some of the terms that we're using. What's the difference between a mentor as opposed to a coach, as opposed to a manager, from your experience and the way that you look at those different elements to the same role?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Ingrid, and I must say, a lot of the programs I run, we talk about coaching, we talk about mentoring, and typically for most people, the distinction lies with coaching tends to be more short-term, skill-based on a particular discipline. So I'm going to coach a sales professional on how they open a meeting, how they build credibility, how they build rapport. So certain things, and the art of coaching typically is to ask a lot of open-ended questions and trust that the person who you're coaching has the resources within them. My job as a coach is trying to get these out, right?
Beautiful.
Mentor tends to be a lot more longer term, and it could be across a lot of different elements.
Right.
And there might be an element of teaching and telling in the mentoring relationship, because hopefully the person is going to be benefiting from your experience, from your knowledge, etc.
Yes.
One of the things I always share with sales leaders in particular, though, is firstly, coaching is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, catalyst for high performance.
Yes.
But it's one of the first things that get either deprioritized or cancelled, because it's hard to measure. Right? It's hard to measure in terms of the actual numbers. But when it comes to then developing, is you have to look at where the person you're responsible for, where they're currently at, where they want to get to, presupposing there's a gap. And what does this person need in order to go from where they are to where they need to be or where they want to be? Which might involve some coaching, which means, hey, Ingrid, I'm not going to give you the answer to this. I'm going to hold the space, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's okay, because I want you to learn something here, but I'm not going to give you the answer, right? Versus mentoring will be, hey, I'm going to give you something, but one of the key things I've always, and I learned this from a mentor of mine, said, if I'm going to give you an answer, if that's what you want, I'm happy to give that. But here's the only thing I'm going to ask you in return. If I give you the answer, or I give you an answer, or I give you an instruction, understand that it's just my perspective. It doesn't mean it's the only perspective. But here's the only thing I'm going to ask of you. Please make sure that you commit to at least implementing this for a period of time, so you can see if it works or it doesn't work for you. So in other words, don't discount it, because there are a lot of people that give advice or give some sort of guidance, and the person they're giving the guidance to doesn't do any implementation whatsoever. So as a manager, as a leader, as a coach, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you the benefit of my experience. It doesn't mean it's the only way, and it certainly doesn't mean it's the best way, but it is just a way. All I'm going to ask for you in return is to take that on board and implement it to see how it works for you. And then we'll have a conversation about it. Whereas the coaching part will be, I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to come up with what you think of the answer, and then I'm going to hold you accountable for the answer that you come up with. So but in my conversations, though, with clients, one conversation could have mentoring, it could have coaching, and it could have teaching, all in the one conversation. The underlying presupposition is, I'm here to help accelerate your development. That's my purpose.
I love that. I think that's a really good distinction, because they're often used interchangeably, and they actually are quite different, albeit very important separate skills that kind of fall under that umbrella of sales leadership there. So, okay, talk to me about the mission you're on, Darren.
The mission, well, it's not some grandiose, like I heard the other day. I heard a podcast from a guy called Mo who's was on a mission to create 1 billion happy people on the planet.
Right.
my mission is to help as many sales leaders be exceptional as I possibly can. I don't have a specific number, but I look at the world as certainly glass half full, and I certainly like to think I've got a growth mindset. So one of the biggest challenges that I experienced myself, but also I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of sales leaders experience since, is that it's very difficult to make the transition from an individual contributor to a sales leader without the support of somebody, whether it be a buddy, a confidant, a mentor, a coach. And unfortunately, still in 2025, there's so many organizations that do not provide the environment for that transition to be seamless or easier, right? Not to say it's easy, and nor should it be, but the mission that I'm on is to help these guys to make that transition and know that A, sales leadership is not for everybody. But B, if you do choose or you're given the opportunity to become a sales leader, understand that the skill sets are fundamentally going to be different, and that you might have to understand that it's as a salesperson, where most of it was based on you and you getting the result for you, it's now no longer about you, and it never will be about you. So are you able to make that transition? And my mission is to help them make that transition for those that do truly want to be a sales leader, who are there to serve others and help them do that in a way that is not too challenging, but it's something they're prepared to go through in order to come out the other end and feel that, you know what, this is the mission that I'm on for myself, and I'm going to leave a long legacy, or what I call the leadership shadow, for people coming behind me. So that's, in a broad term, that's the mission.
That's just magnificent. You talk about, making it as seamless as possible for people to move into sales leadership, Darren. And you said that, you know that for some people it's going to be for them, and for other people, it's not going to be for them. You talked about, sales leaders being of service to those that they lead, and it's about them now. And it's no longer about them, themselves as individuals being responsible for a number. It's about them being responsible for the people who are responsible for the number.
Correct.
In your experience, what are the kind of people that sales leadership isn't for? Who are the ones that typically, that think that they want to be a sales leader, but then, they get into it, they get the opportunity. What are some of the things that you've noticed and you're kind of like, oh, I don't think this person's going to make it, or that person very quickly recognises it's not what I thought it was going to be?
It's a great question, and at the risk of sounding like a cliche or stereotyping and generalisation, I don't want to do that. But my experience and my observation over time is that if you've got a sales individual contributor who is a high performer, who loves the recognition that comes with high performance, I've seen a lot of those get the opportunity to transition into sales leadership, and they've simply floundered because they recognise that they can no longer lead the hunt. They can no longer be front and centre when the big deals come in. They have to take a bit of a backward step.
Right.
They often also, I've seen people come into a sales leadership role thinking that, well, this is a promotion, which means I'm going to get prestige, status, higher income, etc., etc. They quickly realise that you probably had more income earning capacity as an individual contributor, because at least your own performance was in your hands. Right. You now have responsibility for a team of people where their own performance is in their own hands, but you get the average or the accumulation of the numbers, which means Pareto principles are going to play out. Just because you've got salespeople hitting or overachieving the number doesn't necessarily guarantee that you as a sales leader is going to do that. Yes. So it's a challenge, and I found this myself. I ended up, my first couple of years, I made less money than some of my top performing salespeople, right? Yeah. And there were times when I'm thinking to myself, is this right? Should this happen?
Yeah.
So for people who are wanting to, get the accolades, high achievement, loves the fight, loves the hunt. sales leadership may not necessarily be that, unless you're in an organization where the sales leaders also are required to be the hunters. And I know that some companies, they've got a bit of a hybrid model where you have an individual target plus your responsibility for a team. The ones that I've seen become more sustainably successful and fulfilled are the ones that understand that it's not about them. They're more the facilitator of the group rather than the performer of the group, if you know what I mean. So being able to take a bit of a step back, being able to collaborate, being able to delegate effectively, and understanding that it's not about them. It's giving, as Simon Sinek says, when the proverbial hits the fan, it's putting your hand up and saying that happened on my watch. But when good things happen, it's giving the accolades to the people who actually did the work.
Yeah.
And not
which is kind of... Yeah, I mean, for a lot of salespeople, that's almost anathema to them, to be thinking about, handing over the accolades to other people. It's it takes a certain person. We're gonna delve into that a little bit more in another question, because I really want people to be able to walk away with the benefit of all of your experience here in this very nuanced skill. Just on that, Darren, I mean, it is a particular skill. I believe it's underinvested in, and I also believe it's undervalued because of all of the things that you've alluded to so far. And one of those is that we take our best salesperson and we pop them into that leadership role, and for the reasons that you've just outlined, sometimes it's not a great idea. We lose our best salesperson and we gain, a reluctant leader or a lousy leader, someone who's really not cut out for that. They were good at that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that. And yet they're thrown into these roles without any real investment or support in the skill of being a good sales leader. Now, you've doubled down on this. So you're not one of those facilitators, consultants, speakers, or experts in all things B2B sales. You've really honed in further into sales leadership. Talk to me about why that particular skill is a real focus for you and your work.
Well, it's because my own experience first and foremost is I didn't really have the transition plan or the blueprint to make a seamless transition. I mean, I nearly burnt out in the first 90 days, even though I had been prepared, or what I thought was prepared for the role, right?
Yeah, right.
It's one thing to be completely prepared what you think is for the role, but then when you're in the role, hey, you're actually doing the role. So the expectations all of a sudden are getting thrust upon you, right? So, and I see organisations, as you rightly said, giving people who are the star performers the opportunity to move into a sales leadership role. Sometimes not that they want to volunteer to do that, but because they've been a great salesperson, that's what they get. And it takes a certain type of person, I believe, to be a really effective sales leader, and that is one of the key virtues of a great sales leader, of an exceptional sales leader, is a level of selflessness. So realizing it's not about you, which means you got to be looking for opportunities where you can now serve your team. So servant leadership is a big element of what I talk to sales leaders about. Yes. Which means, and when we talk about servant leadership, it's not about you doing things for them, but how do you create an environment where they can be self-sufficient, independent of thought. You can guide them, but not give them the answers. And that's where I link back to the resourcefulness versus resources debate. But it's unfortunate that companies just see, well, I've got a great sales star here. They will automatically make a great sales leader, and it's not the case, right? And I think it comes from a position of ignorance, and I don't think enough organizations are investing enough in the sales leadership level, because most of the budgets that companies have are allocated to the sales people, the sales teams, because that's what's going to generate the numbers, right?
100%. And it's much more, it's easier to track, isn't it?
Well, it is, because you can then track returns on investment for the sales team in terms of, are they hitting their numbers? Are we increasing profitability? It's a little bit more difficult to see the sales return on your sales leadership development because it'll be things like engagement, attrition rates. You might see behaviour change, but what a company's got to measure? Well, we've got to measure the sales profitability, top line, bottom line revenue, etc. Unfortunately, there's a lot of organisations that don't prioritise sales leadership development, and if they did, then what they'll find is not all of the sales leaders they have in the organisation, A, probably want to be a sales leader, and B, have the long-term capabilities of being a sales leader. And that probably also comes back to these organisations really sitting down and thinking, are you crystal clear as to what you want in a sales leader in this organisation? Because a lot of them are just, and I'll just say it, they're glorified salespeople, right? Because they've been taught to hit a number, so they then get promoted. And what do they do now? They continue to hit a number, which means in the process, rightly or wrongly, consciously or unconsciously, many of the times they disintermediate their sales team, and they then become the I guess the point of contact for key customers because they're the decision maker. They're the ones that make it happen. So it's the ability to be able to step back and not be front of mind or take the front of the team. And it's the selflessness. It's not about you. It's about how you can enable your team. Because I say to them, your ultimate role is to make your role redundant. You want to be in a position where within a certain amount of time, you're no longer needed in this team because you've got people who are going to take the team forward.
Yes.
So you've got other things to now do. So, it's a long way of answering the question, but there are some
No, it's fabulous. It gave a lot of depth to the question that I asked about why it was a focus for you in the work that you do. I want to kind of talk now about some of the challenges that sales leaders are facing today and the things that contribute to their success in today's environment and the things that are not going to contribute to their success. I don't want to call it a failure necessarily, but so let's talk about the challenges they face first, and then we'll look at the success factors, and then we'll look at the things that could impede on their success.
Well, as we talked about before, today is I'm not sure when this is going live, but today is the end of the financial year for most organisations, right? So I know there are organisations all over Australia who have their end of financial year today. You've got sales leaders sitting in rooms trying to forecast and get deals done as quickly as they possibly can. And it's literally get everything in at the end of close of business today. So the challenge that sales leaders typically face is it's all about the numbers. So success in vast majority of organisations is measured by what the scoreboard tells us. So if we have not hit our number by the end of today, in many cases the business is going to look at our sales team and therefore us as a sales leader as not achieving, therefore you are a quote-unquote failure. Now, tomorrow is a brand new day. Tomorrow being the 1st of July, we've got a clean slate, so we start from scratch. But here's what I also know. That sales leaders in the last 30 to 60 days have been working their butts off to try and bring as many deals in as possible from next financial year so we can make this financial year look as fantastic as possible. And our eyes have not been on the first quarter for 2026.
Right.
So it's all about the here and the now. So the pressure that sales leaders are under it's extraordinary. And I've seen it firsthand. What's your gap close strategy? You've got people who are sitting in, and sometimes I refer to this as the ivory tower, who've never really carried the bag, don't really understand the sales cycle, don't understand the buying cycle. They just say, hey, get this in, and if you can't get it in, we'll get somebody who can, right? And they're not there to help you. So there's a lot of pressure because you've got the expectation from the senior leaders in your board, you've got the expectation from customers, you've got the expectations from internal stakeholders, and you've got the internal pressure from your sales team who are trying to get your bandwidth, your time, your thought process to try and get things done to close out the financial year or any month. And it's all consuming, right? So it sometimes feels like we are the ones that keeping the balls in the air, but also we're entirely accountable for driving the number. And the unfortunate thing is the business will tell us whether we're successful or not based on the number that we achieve, not What are the attitudes? What are the aptitudes, the competency sets, the behaviours that we're demonstrating that will lead to the number? And that's what I focus more about is, okay, the scoreboard's a scoreboard, but let's take a step back and think about what is the skill sets you need to develop? What are the capabilities you need to develop? What's the virtues you're putting in place, the values, the standards of excellence you're putting in place for your team that you can now measure, not just the scoreboard? And that is in itself a big challenge, because sales leaders are telling me, you don't understand. I've got a sales director who is calling me constantly. You've got this as a 30% opportunity. You've told me last week it was now 45% opportunity. What's going on? And it's how can I help you? It's what are you doing to close the gap? And it's like, well, I've got sales leaders that's telling me I'm not sure whether this is the gig for me. What else could I be doing? Right? And it's hard. Yeah. Because it's almost like it's the here and now rather than the planning for the next 90, 120 days beyond. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, you know how you talked about people that are sitting in their ivory towers? I mean, it just, that example that you gave there about the change from 30% to 45% in the CRM, or let's even just say, let's say that it's gone from 50% to 75%, right? You know, that final 25%, if you don't have an appreciation of what it takes in order to bring in opportunity, you're going to ask questions like that there's no real appreciation of the long-term ongoing ripple effect that will create. Let's just say I could, magic that into fruition. At what price? To my reputation, to the company's reputation, to my relationship with that client, to my relationship with people who know that client, who have associations with that client, to my future pipeline, all of those things as well. What can companies be doing then, besides just saying, well, we're not doing that? But, I mean, that'd be a good start.
Yeah.
But what can companies be doing to better set their sales leaders up for success so that they have an environment that they can thrive in and that their teams can thrive in?
Well, first and foremost, we've got to put the elephant in the room, and that is, at the end of the day, the scoreboard will say whether we're successful as a business or not. So we have to hit targets. Right. So the targets are the targets, right? So let's just, that has to happen. We've got to achieve our numbers, right?
Yep.
But the problem with a lot of organisations is we don't do any deep analysis underneath that number and say, okay, what are the behaviours we need to set? What sort of environment do we need to set up to support the sales leaders so they can support the sales team to get the number that we need to get? They just say, hey, year on year, we need to drive 25% growth. And by the way, we're going to do it with no more resources. There's no more changing process. In fact, if anything, we're going to increase the level of administration expectations. We're going to expect you to bring in new, not so much new selling techniques, but there'll be new marketing we're going to do, and we expect you to support that. We expect you to provide all these reports up to the senior leaders as to what's working, what's not working. But there's no real strategy around, okay, we want to set this business up for long-term success. And in order to do that, how do we manage an environment and set the environment up for the sales teams to be sustainably successful? Not just successful this year, but sustainably successful. So what are the behaviours we need to have in place? What's the hierarchy we need to put in place? What sort of training do we need to give to the sales leaders or to the sales people? What sort of training do we need to give to the marketing team or the CRM team or the finance team? How do we set up the ecosystem that enables these guys to be successful, not just keep throwing the targets at them and expecting because they're salespeople to drive the number? And that comes from a position, I think, of ignorance, dare I say arrogance in many organisations, because they think we have the best product in the marketplace. That everybody wants to fall over themselves to purchase. They don't sit back and say, hang on, what actually makes us unique? And how can I enable our people to drive what that uniqueness is so they can have some meaningful conversations and plant those seeds that, you know what, we might be successful this year, but if we're not, we're certainly planting some seeds so we can be successful in the first half of next year or in 2027, right? So we're playing this long-term game, not the short-term game. And unfortunately, when there's lots of changes in organisations, they'll come in and they'll put a new chief revenue officer or a chief marketing officer, and the first thing they do is do a restructure, right? Not to do an analysis on the environment in terms of what's working, what's not working. And sometimes the sales teams and the sales leaders are victims of that because this new person's coming in and said, well, this worked at IBM, so I'm just going to do the IBM model. I'm just going to put it in here, and all of a sudden it doesn't work, and it's dysfunctional.
Yeah. Right.
There's lots of challenges, but it also requires the sales leaders,
yes,
to step up, to actually speak up, to know what success looks like for them, to actually have a plan, right? So this is not always at the behest or the responsibility of the organisation, because sales leaders have the opportunity in that position to actually forecast, to create an environment that they think is going to be conducive to long-term exceptional performance, but they don't sit down and think about what are the behaviours I need to put in place, what are the leadership values and the standards of excellence we need to put in place that then become non-negotiable.
Yes.
They just get focused on the number, which comes back to the original point, is because they've been a great salesperson, that's what they know. So they come in a sales leadership position, so they start to drive the number. They don't start looking at what are the behaviours, what are the standards, what are the values, etc., and drive those.
Yeah. What are all of the things that are going to drive those numbers in a sustainable way over time?
Yeah.
Yeah, by creating a really strong sales culture in my team. Oh, Darren, people are going to be absolutely falling over themselves, I think, to find out where they can, where they can find you, where they can find out more. I will include a link to your podcast here and to your website as well. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up today?
In terms of pearls of wisdom?
Yeah, yes.
Look, one of the things I'll share is, I believe sales is the ultimate form of service, and sales leadership is a privilege. It's not for the faint-hearted. You often feel as if you are literally the meat in the sandwich because you've got people coming from all angles. But it is a very, very satisfying and can be a very fulfilling career. If you understand that it's about how you enable people to become exceptional. One of the things that I was never big on is, and maybe it's just my personality, I was never big on, getting all the accolades for being number one. It was nice to get up there and get the accolades and the recognition, but I got a lot more satisfaction from seeing people who I had responsibility for, or I had a part in their development, actually get those accolades, thinking, you know what, it wasn't about me saying, yep, I taught that person, or I developed that person. It was a case of I saw that coming when nobody else saw it, and I invested in that person, and just look at what they've now achieved. I had a small part to play in that, and that's the biggest thing for me, because there are people that I had in my teams many years ago who have gone on and done great things, and we still talk about them, and I still talk about them very favourably, and we don't do it because, hey, you're a great sales leader and therefore I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. But it's just every now and then to say, you know what, it was a conversation or there was something that this person taught me that is I've held on to, and I've now gone and used that to expand even further and pay it forward and help other people. It's really satisfying.
Yeah. Oh, anyone working with you with that approach to sales leadership by saying it, sales leadership is a privilege, it's an act of service. They're all of the values that I really hold dear to me too. So it's just music to my ears to hear you say that too. And I love your approach towards that servant leadership of being there for your people, of looking at the behaviours, the cultures, the values, all of those elements. It has been an absolute privilege to speak with you today, Darren. I've loved every minute of it, and maybe you might come back one day.
Well, I would love to, Ingrid, and true disclosure, you were a wonderful guest on my podcast a little while ago, and we said we were going to do this, and I'm glad we got to. got to do it.
Me too.
I mean,
Yeah.
look, for me, and I don't know whether you have this as well, but people often come to me and say, how come you have people on your podcast who potentially are competitors in the same spot, in the same field? And I'm thinking, well, I don't look at them as competitors. I look at people who are on a like this massive mission together.
Yeah.
To help drive more professionalism, more service, have a better reputation around sales and sales leadership.
Yeah.
We're all different. We might come from a different perspective. We're all in this together. And as the old well-worn cliche says, that the rising tide is going to lift all boats. So I love the mission you're on as well. So keep up the great work at Sales Revolution and the Sales Doctor. And for me, it's been a pleasure to be with you as well.
Thanks, Darren. Look forward to next time.
Excellent.
Okay, you've been listening to The Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard. And to find out how the Sales Doctor can help your organisation to transform its revenue, growth and profit, visit us on our website at www.thesalesdoctor.com.au. I look forward to your company next episode. Bye for now.